everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of the Canary. And we have a bit more of a fun topic this time. We're going to be talking all about gamification, which, if you don't know what that is, I'm sure you're probably more familiar with it than you realize. And here to talk about this topic today, we have our guest today, Marlese Lessing, who happens to be a gaming friend of mine.
It's is the term gamer girl still applicable nowadays? Has it gone through that kind of sine wave of it's cool again, or is it still kind of in the downward dip there?
I don't
I
know.
prefer the title gamer creature, especially considering the horrors that I tend to commit upon my spine when I'm playing on the Switch. Um,
And I understand, Marlese, that you are a technical writer. Tell me a little bit about that.
So, I've had kind of a jack of all trades in terms of jobs. My first job out of college was working for a fairly small media tech company, writing mostly B2B white papers about various new emerging technologies. So when SaaS, software as a service, was just starting to peek over the horizon of new technological advancement, we were on top of that, along with kind of the big wave of cloud and kind of this whole subscription wave that we now see and that we now live in. Then I actually switched over to financial writing. Up until recently, I was working for a financial website mainly focused on business loans, as well with a bit of debt refinancing and debt relief. Generally, jack of all trades with personal and business finance content. That was a little more SEO focused, but we also did pretty in-depth guides on working with the SBA, so on and so forth. I say up until recently because, point of disclosure, if you look at my LinkedIn, I was laid off recently. But I still work in the freelance sphere, doing a bit of technical writing and copywriting. I've been all over the place.
Great. Well, I can relate to the finance things because I work for a law group that deals with the default space of loans and collections. So very familiar, and also real estate title and real estate transactions. So I can relate somewhat. Where I'm not as maybe relating as much as the two of you is I am not a big gamer. But I will say that some of these concepts around gamification, folks in my generation are very excited to learn from your generation, that the different things that we can do to make work life more interesting and engaging for people. I think this is a great concept. So I was glad that the two of you thought of this topic.
If there's one thing that was really intimidating about my entrance into the workforce at about 2018 or so, it was professional development and evaluations, because those are a pretty big part of being in the workplace. But they can be extremely stressful, especially if you're just starting out, since the way it's done in a lot of places, you're not really sure about how you're doing until that half year mark or that year mark when you get your evaluations. And that can feel really on edge when you're already somebody as a neurodivergent who gets some really conflicting or even no feedback about your experience in the world. Well, you'll only find out you messed up a social interaction like a while later when somebody says, hey, this has been bothering me the whole time, but I didn't tell you about it. And as such, when you have enough of those experiences pile up, you can sort of have a lot of anxiety about, how am I actually doing? How do I win at life? Because it doesn't seem like the rules are very clear. However, video games, by their nature, have to have those rules defined and cleared, because even the most broken game out there has to have all of its rules articulated in the code, even if you have to hack and data mine it to find out what those are. The rules are clearly defined here where they aren't in reality. And I found that kind of escapism can get kind of a bad rap. But the thing is, like you said, the professional world agrees with us in having game mechanic like stuff drive engagement. And this time I have this nice book that I picked up at the Think 2019 conference that I went to right before COVID shot a lot of business conferences to the ground.
So Marlese, what got you interested in this topic of gamification of work?
I think for many neurodivergent folk, you already kind of go about life, at least for me, in kind of a gamification mode because it is a very logical way of organizing things and by helping you feel accomplished. And I've been feeling this especially hard now that I have a 15-month-old at home. And sometimes I feel like I get nothing done all day except for answer a handful of emails and maybe get half a load of laundry done. So breaking down things into these individual tasks and understanding the kind of resources that are going into them and how they really plug into your overall personal reward structure is just a really helpful way of going about it and understanding how you're making progress in both your personal and your professional life. I know when I graduated from college, a bit of a source of anxiety for me was, as Ingrid mentioned, getting a good pulse on how I was doing. I think when you're in school, especially, you already have kind of a gamified system, for better or for worse, with your grades. You write a paper or you do a quiz, you hand it over, you get a grade, and you get a good pulse of how you're doing, how your projects are reflecting your knowledge, if you need to study up. Not so much with work. And I think we all have this hidden anxiety of we're chugging along and we think that we are doing really well, and then suddenly your boss at performance evaluation time says, actually, everything is terrible and it's been going terribly for the past 6 months because you have not been getting that feedback. So bottom line, gamification as a topic, and this is also just coming from somebody who's been playing, I don't know if you count Freddy Fish as a video game, even though it was scored by the great Jeremy Soule. Yes, that same guy who did the Skyrim soundtrack. But as somebody who's been, playing video games since she was very young and who got into the RuneScape grind at the ripe old age of 11 and who is still a gamer whenever she can squeeze it in between toddler nap times and everything else that I have to do, it's a nice, consistent way of going about your day and of going about your tasks and your goals and making it consistent. And
I love that.
And I think
it goes in with, I'm a project management professional, so breaking things down and having partial completions along the way where you feel like you've accomplished something is helpful. But let me just say, as somebody who does not have kids who are little or cute anymore, as I like to tell them, I think at the stage you're at, if your child is surviving at the end of the day and the rest of you are, that is already an accomplishment.
It's the escort quest. You're keeping their HP above 0.
No, absolutely.
Yes.
If you survive the wave of enemies, which is to say the various messes that your toddler is making around the house, you've done it.
Yeah, part of my background is in user experience and user interface design. It was part of my focus of my informatics degree, and even when I started learning it in college, I can now not turn off the part of my brain that's thinking of the user experience, even when I'm just doing mundane tasks like, this medical form is not structured very well for being able to get things done and whatnot. And the being able to just provide like these tangible incentives and checkpoints for keeping people moving along an experience flow is really important. And this isn't just important from the consumer side of things, where you getting frustrated with a website's UI is the difference between you ordering Domino's versus Papa John's when you're a hungry college student. It's also important for employee engagement too. Even just this weekend, I was doing some studying for a Microsoft certification I'm planning to take, and their portal uses a lot of stuff with gamification, with giving you badges for the various modules you passed and XP for the various modules you complete. I'm level 9 on my Microsoft Learning profile for the record, and I've got somewhere around 33k EXP. Oh, and how many of you are keeping up a Duolingo streak right now? If you are, you know exactly why gamification works, because that app also uses a ton ton of it. I mean,
I'm surprised Duo hasn't sent out a hit on me, to be honest. I kept up my Duolingo streak until the night before I went into labor, and now I'm probably on a Duo hit list somewhere, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that actually illustrates another important principle around gamification, because it's not just the systems, it's the narrative that's built around the systems. And that's often why it can be so effective. It's like they saw people making jokes about the bird going to break into your house if you didn't keep things up, and they decided to lean into it. And that ended up helping push a lot of engagement.
I have to agree. I haven't done a lot of gaming type of things, but when I started a Duolingo to learn German before our Danube River cruise coming up, I noticed how guilty I feel if I skipped a day because something happened, and it really helps me feel guilty. I will say that.
And they have Duo like crying on screen. Why have you abandoned me?
But I think I want to look at the outline for a moment. And Ingrid, you made a point here: providing tangible progress markers and quantifiable metrics for time and effort are a really big deal. And I think for me, I'm thinking about, you talked about the progress reviews, where it'd be nice to have more check-ins and maybe things you're going through at check-ins. But I even think that you can make this for your day-to-day use of work management systems at your company. What I had thought of was the fact that the type of work our company does, we have a lot of people that do basically what I would want to call assembly line law, where we do high volume litigation. And so there's just a lot of repetitive types of tasks that happen on these work management systems. And we have ways of tracking how much everyone got done on these systems, but there really aren't any rewards there. To me, you could do a Duolingo styled thing where, hey, you just got 100 of this thing done, and it, fireworks go off and look at you, you got this much done. Or, if you hit the quota for the day at 3 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock, something goes off that you're ahead of the curve, I don't really see this in work systems.
This is perhaps something where, like you said, my generation has a good idea of stuff that can help drive engagement for everybody. But I say that even the ones that have been adopted into the business world are too basic. We're both gamers and professionals. Let's take the lessons we've learned from games even further to drive engagement. Because Marlene and I do this all the time already. It's like almost ingrained to the point where it's just like, when I learn a new skill, like, hey, I just learned how to install edging around my garden. That's a level up. Just sort of going off with the fireworks in my head, like you said. And in RuneScape, they always played a musical jingle for it too.
Yeah, every time, like I had like a tray of chrysanthemums that I needed to plant, and I was putting it off forever. And then when I finally got it done, I had like the little gardening level up jingle going in my head.
Yeah, I think in my personal life I do, and I think Ingrid and I both talk about doing this. When we have something hard we need to do. And by the way, I have a rule. I said one hard thing on a Monday. I always try to do one hard thing on a Monday. Maybe it's calling some company you need to get something done with, and you're going to be online for, or waiting on hold for an hour, and it's going to drive you crazy. So get that done, or get that dentist visit done on Monday, etc. But whatever that hard thing is, afterwards, plan a reward. Like I just got my COVID shot the other weekend, and so, hey, I'm going to go give myself a smoothie because I just went and got my shot.
I did that too. And like, another thing that's really difficult about the workplace that games have sort of helped me is understanding how teams work, because autistic folks especially can kind of just look at a hierarchy chart and just go, okay, but what does anyone actually do? What's the function of how teams actually fit together? Because oftentimes the random tell me about yourself kind of things for ice breaking just don't really help us all that much. However, in video games, team roles are very clearly defined, and usually there's kind of this triangle of roles. You have the tanks, which are the people who are out first and like are the ones that are kind of taking the attention of the big monster away from the rest of the group. And I was sort of thinking about where's the analog of this in the professional environment? Oh, yeah, that's like the project managers and stuff who's more the leadership on the team. So if you get nothing else from this podcast, you can feel a little bit more heroic going into this week. You're the one holding up the shield. Whereas I think a lot of especially autistic folks are more on the DPS side of thing, which is an acronym that means damage per second, aka actually taking down the big monster and being more task oriented. And the problem is that we try to slot them into the other roles when they really would just be good sitting here actively taking on the task. A lot of like promotion structure is like, okay, you did the thing, now you're managing people doing the thing. And in this case, that's moving from a DPS role to a tank role when maybe you just need to specialize more in being a DPS.
I will say,
And
I
also,
think Zoom meetings would be so much more interesting if we could all just have Team Fortress 2 style introductions for each team member. I am JavaScript coder, and this is my code.
Well, that could be team culture, right? And you bring up a good point, because I think when we get focused on the getting it done, sometimes we neglect to build a culture that people want to associate with, and having, whether that's a mascot or whether that's different roles you're playing on the team, that you have special names or other things. I like that concept of having your own team style and culture.
I think it helps and both make people feel very secure and comfortable in their roles. And for me, it really encourages kind of cross-team collaboration, where in which you can say, I am not an expert in this. I am going to go to somebody who is an expert in that. And people like to be helpful.
Right.
When I reached out to somebody and I said, hey, I don't know a lot about this topic, or I know you have a lot more experience in this, I would love your insight on this. They were always happy, to pull me into a huddle or into a call and just talk about what they do and share their advice. And I think that goes a long way, because especially when you have really large companies with a lot of fantastic talent in them, it's such awesome breeding ground to have that collaboration, and also to kind of up your own skills and even do a little bit of networking as well, when you're able to reach out to the sniper and say, hey, how do I do this thing?
yeah. And on the sort of the UI UX front, user experience really is king in this day and age. A lot of people kind of just put up with systems being bad at work because it's really difficult to leave unless you have something else lined up. Whereas gamers do this kind of stuff for fun. So it's like if they're not having fun, they can just leave. It's really easy to just see the massive difference there. And it's like sometimes it doesn't even matter how long they've been playing your game. If you do something that they don't particularly like, bam, they're gone. And it's just could be important to be proactive about this kind of stuff, because it's like it's not just about making money. If people want to stay working at your company because it's good, then there's less likely of a chance that they're going to leave.
I think as far as the user interface at work is, I mean, I'm on several different systems. Some are out of off-the-shelf systems, and others are homegrown systems. And I think if it's not intuitive, that's when I have an issue. If it's not really easy to navigate and it takes a lot of explanation where to go to find things, that's when I get frustrated. So I just like things to be pretty obvious, and I don't like a lot of jargon and abbreviations that are not explained. And one of the things that I have found, to, again, make things easier to navigate, when I'm going in a new area, I'm always, well, what are your acronyms and terms? Because I do special projects in different areas that I'm not always the most familiar in. And people will make all kinds of assumptions that all of their acronyms or whatnot, and these can end up translating into the user environments, right? And so I find that this makes it more challenging, I think, when you're onboarding people, because they're not only trying to do something in a system, they're like, what in the heck does this even mean? What are all of these abbreviations you've used? Because you may have those same abbreviations. They mean something else to you altogether.
Mm. UX is also a really, really important part of flow. When you are trying to complete a task and not have to break your focus or break your brainwave on it, having a frustrating UX absolutely impedes that. If you look at a video game where, if you look at a streamer where they are doing something incredibly challenging, like playing League of Legends on a competitive level, or for a RuneScape allegory, if they're fighting a boss and they're, say, only using a specific type of healing item or no type of healing item, or they're trying to speed run something, they have the UX down pat. They understand where they need to go for a healing item, where they need to go to switch weapons, and so on and so forth. And the UX very often reflects that. And nothing frustrates me more when I'm working with the UX where I have to go through multiple menus to dig up a tool that I have to use multiple times. There was one workplace where I was that used a bespoke publishing platform where I had to highlight all of the changes that I was making to a document. I had to click through 6 buttons to get to the highlighter.
Oh, wow.
That is not conducive to having a good workflow. You lose your train of thought and you lose that critical line that you have when you're trying to focus on a task when you have a UX like that.
And well, there is another important thing that boss fights in video games and honestly games through in general to help engagement and flow: music. Music makes an absolutely huge difference in task engagement. In fact, it's often been shown that paradoxically, folks with ADHD often focus better when there's a bit of noise in the background, especially noise that we can control. And a lot of video game music is the non-lyrical kind of music that really helps. It can get really easy to get stuck, and sometimes all you need is an epic orchestral track to kind of get you through that super difficult task.
Or when you're doing something really mundane, even very straightforward music that's supposed to be on for a very kind of grindy game. Like RuneScape music is great for this. Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing music, just something where you're doing the same task over and over and you want something a little bit more chill in the background. Or, like you said, when you have a more difficult task, having that epic music. My husband knows it's a really rough day for me when I am playing Bloodborne's Cleric Beast. Or Vort of the Boreal Valley. That's one of my struggle day tracks.
So I'm a little conflicted on this topic, I will say, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit. I do think you have a good point that everyone probably works better in different ways, and having the right kind of music on in the background that helps you focus can be helpful. I've also run into, though, and since I'm a manager and I've had a team reporting to me before in the past, I've had issues sometimes with, you go by somebody and they're so engaged in what's on their headset, you feel like you can't interrupt them to get their to actually have a conversation. So sometimes I feel like we have to be careful not to compete with whatever's going on in the actual office environment. We have to also be able to disengage from what's on our headsets and actually engage in the people in front of us when that's needed.
I've had that issue too, especially when I was working in an office environment. When I used to work in the newspaper circuit, sometimes I would be really focused on copy editing an article and checking for errors, but I also had to be aware of any changes that my editor wanted to happen. So I did a couple of things with this. First of all, I asked her, what kind of engagement do you want me to have here? And the compromise that we came to was, I have my music in one ear, but I'm out and listening on the other ear. The other thing that...
taking out one earbud.
Yes.
I like that.
And I made it very visible. Like, I would always tie my hair back. So even if I had one earbud in, they would know if they needed to tap my shoulder, there was something. And the other compromise that I came up with, and I have applied this to all of the workplaces that I've been in, was you just have specific sections of your day where you're, as the Gen Z kids say, locked in. When you are on Do Not Disturb, I am focused. I am going to put on the entirety of the Dragon Age soundtrack while I focus in on this. And this is just my no interrupto time unless something is on fire or someone is dying or there are donuts in the break room.
And that's
And
reasonable. I think you can block your calendar when you're having times like that. And yeah, I mean, to counter my point of, hey, I don't want to not be able to actually engage someone who's in front of me in the office. I have found that we tend to disrupt our tasks too often for things that are not urgent, like looking at a chat, looking at a text, being on your email. And I do agree that, you know, especially as a Lean Six Sigma, like operations professional, that switching cost of going between different activities breaks your focus. And sometimes you do need high concentration. So it is good to have those locked in times. And then, yeah, to make sure that maybe whoever's managing you or others on your team understand when you're in which mode, the locked in versus the, hey, I'm ready to engage with you. And you don't have to feel like you're disrupting my music right now.
Whether it's like a Slack status if you're working remote, or a post-it note on your office door, or even on the back of your chair. You know, do not disturb mode till 3 o'clock.
I feel like another really important thing that games do that can often counter some of the traps that can be easy to fall into with the neurodivergent experience is telling you that failure is not the end of the world. Because we went from being in school where getting bad grades could end up having really adverse negative effects to going to a work environment where being evaluated badly could potentially affect like your life performance. And so that ends up setting the bar really high in terms of anxiety. But games, you can usually fail at the same task 100 times and then get up again. And just being able to think that there isn't like this binary state between success and failure is just a really important way to get your thinking.
I think Dark Souls is Souls like in general is such a great lesson with this because the game does punish you for failing, but it doesn't punish you in a way that is irretrievable, with the exception of Dark Souls 2, but let's not get into that.
No, let's not get into that.
It does not punish you in a way that is irretrievable. You lose a bit of time. You have to make the walk of shame back to Ornstein and Smo or back to Ludwig the Accursed. But that's it. You start off with pretty much the exact same thing. Maybe you have to recover a few resources, but they're entirely recoverable. And you just go back at it again. And I think a big thing that, going through a layoff in particular has taught me, because a layoff is really frustrating. It's a little bit insulting in a certain sense, and it's not anything that you want to have happen to you. And something that I've had to cope with over the past couple weeks is, okay, I have been booted back to the bonfire. I got to make the trek back again.
Mm-hmm.
And doing that over and over with, completing a task that you failed, improving on your workplace performance if you get a bad review. As soon as you give up is when you failed. That's when you truly fail, is when you quit out of it.
And you know what? Another thing these things taught me is the value of incremental progress. Because one thing the game does set really well is that basically in the tutorial, you nearly always die to the first boss. So it sets your expectations of, okay, I'm not expecting to win on the first try. And just having that different set of expectations to grade how my progress is really big when you're often told that some of these tasks that are really difficult for you are pretty easy by neurotypical standards. So you kind of wonder, I'm broken, why can't I complete these basic tasks? But if you sort of understand that, hey, this task is legitimately difficult to me, it's okay if maybe I don't get it on the first try. And then you sort of are able to grade yourself incrementally, like, okay, I finally made the freaking medical appointment this time when it's really difficult for me to do that. I finally managed to figure out that one attack that kept getting me every single time. And thus, once you finally do win, it feels freaking amazing because it's like, hey, I didn't finally manage to achieve the bare minimum. I did something that was legitimately challenging.
Well, and
And
I
you've
would say
learned from it as well.
in the business world in general, I think we have that fear of failure. Like if we don't want to try things where we might have failure the first time, and it keeps businesses from innovating. And in order to innovate, you have to be free to fail at certain things in the beginning. I think the important part is, and in project management, we have a time when the project is done, when they encourage you to, the methodology encourages you to do a lessons learned time. And that's where you try to capture both what you did well and also what did we learn that went wrong. So the next time you have a similar kind of project or program, you don't make the same mistakes. I think that you only fail if you didn't learn from the things that went wrong, right? That's the failure. Or if you make a mistake in the workplace, and I've had this just the other day where I did something that I'd forgotten. Someone told me not to do this particular thing, and I had done it, and so you go back and you apologize and you say, "Wow, I'm sorry, I forgot about that." Once you own up to it, that's part of it. And one of the things that I think I've been told that is one of the really sought after skills in the business place right now is resiliency. So a lot of bad things happen. Sometimes it's things where you had a failure. Sometimes it's things that are outside of your control in the environment, like COVID happens or whatnot, and how you're able to come back from those fails is important. And I do want to mention a fun one, because you guys are mentioning the real video games. I remember that movie, you'll remember the name better than me, where Jack Black is in it and they all get dumped into a video game environment. And when they die, when they get killed, then they suddenly pop from the sky and their next life starts. And I don't know what that movie was, but that was pretty fun.
That might have been the Minecraft movie.
I think that was more recent. This was, I think they had a couple of them. Jumanji, I think was what I'm thinking of. Jumanji.
Oh, yeah.
Either Jumanji or, no, that wouldn't be Ready Player One. That one had, I think, Adam Sandler in it. But
I loved how they dropped out of the sky again. It's like, oh, I guess your next life just started. Bounce back and get back in the game.
Okay, so that's a lot of good principles. Now, how do we make that actually practically apply to the workplace? That's the really important takeaway. And fortunately, this topic is incredibly practical. For one, games often end up setting like daily and weekly tasks for you to complete in order to sort of drive engagement and keep you coming back every single time to make a habit out of it. And this is great for both autism and ADHD for different ways. With autism, it sets a pretty regular and expected routine of, okay, this is how much I need to do. And with ADHD, it can be really difficult to overcome the threshold to start a task or schedule things. But if the app's telling you, hey, you need to do this, then it's like you don't have to waste time. You can just be reminded and get right into it. And speaking of the case of difficulty of getting stuff started, a lot of games end up giving you a lot of bonuses right when you start, in order to get you over that initial hump of adoption. And I found that writing myself a little to start a significant project like spring cleaning often ends up doing loads, because once I've actually started the task, then it's much easier to keep up momentum.
I find that also finding something within the task itself or adjacent to the task to make it a lot more bearable, something that you can look forward to within a task. For example, when I clean, and specifically when I do my deep cleaning, like my mopping, I tell myself this is when I'm going to catch up on all of my YouTube videos that I have saved in my playlist. The hour-long ones that go into the deep history of an obscure animatronic at Disney or something like that. And I think that's a big part of how video games go about it. Even when you have to go through the dreadful grind of leveling rune crafting, you can enjoy the fact that you are making progress towards the goal and that you are playing your favorite game, and B, you can also listen to your favorite YouTube documentaries while you're going about it.
I have tools that I use at work more frequently now that I'm trying to get people to adopt well. And I call them baby project management tools. And it's basically where you have kind of tasking boards. and you assign them to people. And so it does the sort of Duolingo style reminders. Hey, your task is due today. Hey, it's overdue, whatever. But the cool thing about them is they have this very satisfying. I always tell people when they're a little nervous getting assigned to these things, it's like, well, first of all, it's nice you can view the tasks by either the different teams or ways you've broken up the project, or you can pick to just see your own task. But when you finish one, you click on it and it's the satisfying ding. So, you have that sort of little auditory clue. And it's funny because I've had people be a little resistant to using these tools, but then when they get to click on that, they're like, how many more things can I click on?
Yeah,
I love Asana.
It's like, sometimes hacking into the crow brain that likes seeing the shiny thing is exactly what you need to do in order to do this sort of thing.
Temperature gauges or level bars are also a really big thing for me. Like when I have, say, 100 tasks to do or 50 articles to write in a month, just being able to see the physical progress of that bar slowly filling up as I get one more thing in is so satisfying. And seeing how close I am to getting done as I get that momentum going.
Well, and I think from a manager perspective, it makes me think if you have staff where they have to learn various things, you can kind of do that leveling up too, where you have some kind of board where like, hey, these are a couple skills they want you to work on. You've now moved up to this part of it, and eventually you'll be up here to have that visual.
Mm-hmm. Spinning a little narrative around the bog standard training that you have to do with basically every position is just a small thing, but it can make it at least marginally more exciting than reading a PowerPoint. You're getting intelligence briefings or whatever the heck.
So I think in conclusion, I know my generation was not as big a gamers, and we have a lot to learn from the gaming, that's going on now in ways that can make things at work more engaging. And, I look forward to people sharing their ideas of other ways we can consider how we can continue engagement instead of just saying, hey, it's work is just adulting. It's like, it doesn't have to just be that. We can make it engaging. We can make things fun, and we can have teams have better culture as a result.
Mm-hmm. I hope this also highlights that neurodivergent folks are not allergic to doing challenging things. It's just, we're already kind of existing on hard mode, and that's often not been fully acknowledged by a lot of previous therapeutic approaches, where it's just like, hey, I'm going to take away your special interest until you manage to do this task you wanted to do. That's a regulatory mechanism. That's like taking the gas out of the car and then expecting it to drive. Whereas it's like, hey, this is really challenging, but we believe that you can do it, and hey, you did the difficult thing. Isn't that so much better of a way to frame it?
Yes. My husband, who is also on the spectrum, has joked that sometimes life as somebody with autism can feel like a Dark Souls naked run. And any gamers who understand this will know this. It's basically trying to play Dark Souls with no armor and a stick, which is about as challenging as you can expect it to be.
And I've often found that people can really neglect and malign play in their adult years, or it's just like, hey, we're supposed to be serious now. But we just got a whole cavalcade of insight precisely from play when we weren't thinking about working. And I think that's often something that gets missed in the discussion around work-life balance, because you can't just be living on survival mode all the time if you want to do new ideas.
Yeah, why survive when you can thrive?
Mm-hmm.
Ingrid already knows that now that I'm an empty nester, I'm in my second adolescence. So, having fun is important because it keeps you motivated. It keeps you going. So
I may not know how to make it to the end of the week if I'm not waiting for what's going to happen in my next D&D session or something.
Mm-hmm. Or just looking forward to, getting to play Dragon Age Origins at the end of the day.
Yes.
And hey, I think one of the main takeaways is if something is stupid but works, it's not stupid. It doesn't matter if people don't say that it's the right way success should look. If it works, it works. And that should be what matters.
That's one of the things that as a neurodivergent individual, I've kind of learned to love about adulthood. It's being able to make up your own solutions. One of the things that frustrated me in school is you had to do a problem the teacher's way. You had to circle the most correct answer on the multiple choice question, even if you had a better answer that you wanted to write in. And in adult life, there is no one correct way to do things most of the time. You know, if you're eating an instant pot meal every night and it's got your protein, veggie, and dairy/carb, you're good to go. You know, you don't need to be making a 5-star course meal with a pan-seared whatever every single night. And if you manage to find something that makes it work for you in your workplace, if you manage to find a shortcut or a solution that does not impede upon the final product, or in fact increases your efficiency, you know, that's the way to go. You don't need to have some sort of arbitrary correct way to go about it.
Well, thank you, Ingrid and Marlese, for coming up with this topic. I would have never thought of this, and we have a lot to learn in terms of increasing our engagement with both work and how we manage things outside of work.
And I just got 50 XP towards my podcasting level.
Yes.
Yes. Anyways, thank you all for joining us and watching. We'll see you next time.
Great to meet you, Marlese. Keep us posted on what you're doing.